E ngā mana, e ngā reo, e ngā kārangatanga maha o te motu rarau mai rā, ki te tūranga waiwai o Te Tiriti o Waitangi. Welcome to Mata with me, Mihi Ngārangi Forbes, made with the support of Te Māngai Pāho and Irirangi Te Motu. This is our special episode, filmed here at Waitangi on the 185th anniversary of the signing of Te Tiriti. Ko taku manuhiri i tēnei hōtaka, ko te mema mo te tai Tokerau, ko Mariameno Kapa o Te Pāti Māori. Tēnā koe te tuakana. Te Pāti Māori is proposing a Treaty of Waitangi Commissioner. How would it work?
It's been part of our thinking for some time in any case, but this is the opportunity to express why we think this is the time to put in a body, an individual, a system, that knows and understands our way of life, the promises that were made, the promise that was made, all that many years ago, 1835, 1840. So we want a watchdog person and persons that have our interests in mind, and that can carry what is, we believe, is still a critical piece of work, which has, to be honest, never really been honoured in the way in which we would expect, in the way in which we signed up, in the way, under the terms in which we allowed whānau to live with us. So that's essentially what it's about, and certainly it shows up particularly in the last year or so, why it's probably needed even more of any other time in our history, since the undoing of these last 400 days of 180 years. Here in 400 days, this lot decide that they know what's better for us and about us, but not discuss it with us.
Like the Health and Disabilities Commissioner, yes, or an Environment Commissioner, yes, that person's role would be to uphold the, yes, ture, the policies, the, yes, understandings, the goodwill, yes, of the Treaty of Waitangi. Yes. So it's not about a race, it's about a commissioner for the Treaty of Waitangi. Yes,
it's powering up. So, and I have, the reason I can speak with confidence around this particular piece is that I'm on the Officers for Parliament team, right? So you get to sit in, I've sat in on the Ombudsman and that review, sat in on the Environmental Commissioner review. And you get to see and understand how this machine works. And I thought, okay, this is how we relate to this is they've got a big and serious job to do, and they are outside monitoring the inside. So it's time for us to bring this thought through. It's amongst our policy thinking and work, but now we can describe it and specify it and go, this will power it up for us, and as well as the tribunal. Those things shouldn't go. Those things still have reason, purpose and value. But this is like powering up. This is us. This is our promise. This is us keeping our own promise to our 1835, 1840 agreements.
And the response so far?
Yeah, actually really positive. And because certainly 100,000 people thought, what a hopeless, this government, what a hopeless situation. And so much so that they walked their talk. And so I haven't spoken to all of the 100,000 over the last 24 hours, but certainly shortly we're gonna see that and more. And so and it's not the first time we've run this idea. So it's time. It's time now.
What about political alignment? Have you heard from anyone in Labour or the Greens? Is this a kaupapa that might sit well in their manifesto?
The co-leaders may have, I haven't. But I guess it's interesting what we've been able to, again, work through in the last year is the way in which we relationship with the opposition parties. And it would be smart to do so. And so we've worked on a couple of projects, and I guess it just shows that we're prepared to create that relationship. No, I mean, we're not committing to betrothal in 2026, but we are up for what would it take? Who are we working with right now? But other than that, I don't know for sure whether it's anything specifically that they'd be looking at.
David Seymour said in a statement that it would have the power to veto would it? Or would it just be, as you said, the ability to look in from the outside?
The best outcome would be to bring that veto component to it. Obviously, I think that's when you do that, you're serious, you're determined, and you are saying we know best about ourselves. We have solutions about ourselves, ground in the middle and in the high, or whatever those echelons are. But we no one could describe our now and our 2040 and our years going forward. So it has to be us that says that. Of course, he's going to say that. He can't help himself. That's the way he thinks, that's the way he discusses things, and that simply just shows the gap of knowledge and knowing that he really has about Ngā Tiriti here and himself and every other Māori.
We're here at Waitangi, 185 years since the signing. It's a good opportunity to really reflect on that relationship, Te Tiriti. What are you making of it? How are we as a nation?
Well, you know, I mean, I'm again 12 months into the role. If I was to take any reference to what's happened in the last 12 months, we're screwed. You might recall it was said at Tūranga Wāwai Marae, and in fact it was even said at the Iwi Chairs Forum at least 2 forums ago. The statement was made, if this lot gets in, right, we're going to be slaughtered. Now, Tuku made that statement. Everyone, that statement, it just rippled across the setting, eh? Do I think that connects with the Crown relationships and the reality of it? Absolutely. And it's a horrible scenario. It's terrible for our whānau at every single level, despite all the efforts made over many years. Yeah, it's a hopeless situation. It's a hopeless set of circumstances. But fortunately, we've got some smart people outside and inside who are just not going to put up with it. So 2026 has to be the time to get them out.
When you talk to Māori who are feeling like you're saying, what are the policies or the issues that concern them the most?
Yeah, I mean, in our beloved Tai Tokerau, and whether it's from Te Reinga Tai atu ki Te Atatu, in my particular space that I work, they are the typical things that you would expect, eh? It's like, so, I can't afford milk, all the flash food, the meat, the vegetables, all of those things, but I can afford chips and a Fanta. You see, that horrible feed that keeps us unwell. So there's those things that are that trap and depress our people into that state. Now, and not just in our homes, because we know that to be true in any case. It is Waipunarangi, Three Waters reform, all of that brought an opportunity, right, for Tai Tokerau, which in that instance, Waipunarangi stemmed from Waikato to Te Reinga. So all of that time, that work, the combination of 10 or 11 different iwi groups to go, okay, we might be hoha with one another over this, but we're prepared to discuss this. That's water, right? Wait lists in our hospitals and our GPs, those things that we're meant to have good access to, and we simply don't.
Waikato is the kaitiaki, if you like, of the kingitanga, as Ngāpuhi is the kaitiaki of Te Tiriti. So we're here in the home of Te Tiriti. And there's not a lot of politicians from the government around. There's a handful. The Prime Minister's in Akaroa. As someone from here, a kaitiaki of the Tiriti, you know, what do you make of that? Well,
they're voting with their feet. They are showing themselves to the rest of the motu that, and they'll provide their own sort of, oh, well, you know, the treaty wasn't signed just here. You know, they talk like that. It's nonsense. So, but there's, you know, and they'll excuse themselves for going, oh, well, you know, they didn't want to see, and, you know, might feel a little bit at risk. So I think it's a betrayal to the things that they talk about. You know, they can run the line, but they can't walk the talk. So come and face it. Come and face it. Be that game. But don't be foolish enough that there will be people here that don't want to see you in any case, because we are trapped in that. So, yeah, do we want them? Do we not want them? You know, whatever they're going to say, it's going to wind people up. That's what I make of it. I make that the last year it's just lead to this point of, you're going to treat us that poorly, you know, dismiss in 25 different bills or so, take the words Maori, We won't have any Maori in it, we won't have any culture, we won't talk about Te Tiriti or Waitangi. Or the treaty, we won't talk about any of that because that's just too brown for ACT Party. So therefore it's too brown for the coalition. And the Minister, the Prime Minister, he can't handle his cabinet, clearly, because this team that sits next to us across the little alleyway there, they're running the show.
You're referring to that ACT Party?
I am.
You sit across the
yes,
halls
they just
from them.
sit across here. So we have a lot of interesting encounters. Most of them, they end up writing lots of letters because they complain about who we are and how we are. But you know, that again, they can't help themselves. They know no other way. They are used to their own comfort and their own privilege and their own white fragility. So you know, it flops out everywhere. You can see it sometimes in the last year.
You've talked in the past about the lack of historical knowledge and specifically knowledge around Te Tiriti within New Zealand Parliament. And I think you said, I don't want to have to do Treaty 101, it should already be understood and appreciated. Is that lack of understanding, do you think, the issue in being able to explain some of the kaupapa that you're trying to present?
It is a gap of knowledge. It's a huge gap of knowledge. When you're trying to hang points that are based on the history, which they have no knowing of, you may as well just give the keys to the pilot. It is utterly hopeless and it's frustrating and a waste of our time. So no, I don't bother going into that sort of Treaty 101 stuff, let alone Noa Māori. But the other part to that is that, it really challenges their psyche. They're just like, why is she talking like that? She speaks, short of saying, doesn't she speak fine Pākehā? That's how they are. And of course, that's ignorance. And again, that's their casual racism rolling out. But it is, I'm looking forward to another year of just doing that, but not offering you a Treaty 101 training.
And I think it was your mates across the aisle there that wrote some letters about some of the words that you used with Karen Chaw as well. Is that intentional, the way you speak, when you have to challenge some of those kaupapa?
It's intentional in that moment. So I don't go and going, okay, I'm working up a script. That's generally not, other than coming to talk with you. Yeah. But when I'm with in those settings, it's a closer environment, eh? So you've literally got the minister right there. So one must take the opportunity to disrupt, if not burn down, their thinking and show to the world, you have the power. Yes, you've got the power, but we know the scenario. I'm qualified. I know this domain. I've worked in that system for long enough to go what works and what fails. Sadly, the majority of it fails. So my intention isn't to be anything else but be clear and just focused and straight. So, and hopefully something might sink in. You can't have a minister who controls that particular oranga tamariki itself. I used to work in that system years ago. When I know that all of this change and all of this disruption, or that change that she's bringing under 7AA, for instance, if I can just talk about that a bit, is based on only two reverse uplifts. Suddenly, she talks about reverse uplifts equals reverse racism. It's nutty. Those two concepts cannot, if you understand the definition of racism, if you understand any of that analysis, you just simply can't talk that way. But she does talk that way because she is completely, her thinking is flawed. Her experience is her own, and kāroha ki aia, but anyone that survives the system does not automatically give you the real understanding that is needed in that role to make such big decisions, like saying culture need not matter, ancestry need not matter.
On kaupapa like tamariki, whenua, wai, is it possible for there to be a cross-party mahi? Could you work with Minister Chaw?
Well, it's funny. I've had a couple of other colleagues from across the way. They want to come down and have a sit down with me, and they want to because they're just troubled by the way I talk and what I express. And it shows a gap in their knowledge, as it does with her, though she hasn't asked to come and sit down with me. And what I believe they're asking is, Mariameno, we really just want to understand how you think, but it's more about, we really want to tell you that where you're going and how you think is completely wrong, because they just don't know it. So would I work, and would there be a cross-party something? She'd have to do some reading, some serious reading. I'm happy to provide the literature, and she would have to, she'd have to take on the advice that a qualified person like me and experienced to an unqualified person as she, and inexperienced, she'd need to be able to take that on for us to actually do some work together.
We're here in Ngāpuhi country. One of the ministers who's here for the Crown is Paul Goldsmith, the Minister for Treaty Negotiations. Yes. In a kōrero earlier this year, he said 2025 for him is going to be about settlements. Are you hopeful that we might see a settlement for Ngāpuhi?
The word settlement, it's, you know, I mean, I'm sure that's been said by others before me, but it's settling these Maoris down is what I think in Ngāpuhi land I want to say. It's like, let's just settle these Maoris, because they're getting a little bit noisy now, right? So we're going to drive the settlement through. We're going to settle you whether you want it or like it or not, right? We're going to settle you down. So that's how I interpret their thinking, and they're, you know, they're puffed up enough, because they've rammed through many a bill in the last year. They're puffed up to believe that they can do that. But I was at the forum tent yesterday, and then on the other end was Wana Tuhare, and great to listen to the kōrero, and she's got that lead role. What I know across, in her discussion she shared, and I know for myself that there are hapu marae that have talked about how they might engage in it, but none of them are talking about we're engaged. We might go some way down that track of a settlement, but none of it will be at the cost of ceding sovereignty. So we're not going to do that so you can say we never ceded sovereignty. We're not going to do any of this at all if you're going to say let your sovereign whatever fade into the abyss. We're not going to do that. So yeah, and you know, when we listen to our whānau and 100,000 other people and so on, I'm not hopeful. Yeah, I'm not hopeful. He is the minister that said colonisation was on balance okay for us. I mean, what a nutcase! What a nutty thing to say! What a disgusting, abhorrent thing to say. So, no, I'm not. I'm reminding myself of that and thinking it's. I'm not hopeful. We're smarter than this, Ngāpuhi.
When you consider that Ngāpuhi is the largest but the poorest of all iwi in Aotearoa, you know, do you hold to those morals, or do you try and find some solution?
Yeah, I think that it is that big a question and that big a take for whānau, and that it has to be on the terms of the discussions that our whānau and our hapu bring to that end. You know, the thing that traps us into is like, oh, you know, there are people that are desperate. Yes. You know, some bucks and
they've all settled, and look at them now. Yeah,
aren't they doing great? It's all of that rhetoric, and I mean, I get it too. And it was one time, some years ago, when I was like, gee, okay, because we were suffering a lot of other terrible things here in the north. But I think when you see the bills that have just been driven through in the last 12 months, there is no faith or confidence that anyone in Ngāpuhi would have to this coalition. You couldn't possibly go, and that's what we've got to choke on. You know, the whole way in which you perceive us. Those are going to be the terms that float around what you might bring through as called a settlement, when we know that you just aren't to settle us down because we're just getting too brown and too bold.
Do you think though that Māori may have felt like that under the Key government, and in the end that actually Chris Finlayson ended up doing some good work with people?
Yeah, potentially, yes. And again, it's these things happen in certain periods of time, and so certain things might motivate or push a hapu or iwi across the line and go, okay, no, gee, we've got to go there, let's do this. And it's not unreasonable that those things happen. They are circumstances of their time, but I think there's a different set of circumstance here, essentially. The last 12 months, their boot is on our throat, and it don't look like it's lifting off in anything. It's probably just grinding down.
Kapai. I've got some quick fire questions for you, if I can. If Te Pāti Māori were to be the kingmaker,
yes,
in the kingmaker position after the next election, could you work with National?
I can't answer it, I guess, essentially. I think it's a hot question. It is, but nothing should be taken off the table, is probably what I would say.
And Chris Hipkins, if he was still the Labour leader, is he someone you think you could work alongside?
I think there's our co-leaders in his leadership and Greens. There's certainly been some connections made that I think could, who knows? Yeah.
Do you yourself, personally have any bottom lines? Things you just could not do? Even if your party could do them, is there things that you're like, nope?
Mokopuna are my life, both work and personal, and our whole strategy works on our mokopuna decisions. So that would be something that I would work to the end, that they are in our arms and in our hands. We're even catching them when they're born, and we're growing them when they're here. Yeah. So mokopuna is the priority for me, and building a future that then they could just pick up and go, we're good to go.
Ka pai. Would you reboot Te Aka Whai Ora or find something different?
I think unfortunately, Te Aka Whai Ora just didn't get enough of a kickstart. I think there's some components in it that I think are worth bringing through, but it just needs the resource. And it was under-resourced in my experience, having been on the edge of that before I came into this job.
Do you prefer a wealth tax or a capital gains? Or both?
Yeah, well, whichever one that gets GST off kai that our whānau can afford and not have to the cost of surviving, not a cost of living, because it's just a horrendous situation for our kids and our families.
What are your priorities in terms of infrastructure?
Our work up in Tokerau before I came into this role, so water is still a key across our whole Tokerau space, whether you're living in Tāmaki, in Tātutu, or whether you're in Tokerau. And quite besides it being a right and all those things, that the infrastructure that we know for the 232 marae is in Te Tai Tokerau, and then, the Waipunarangi, which took us to 68 marae in Waikato. Utterly hopeless. So get that right, make that work. And how do you do that? You ask the people in those places what would work, what would improve the systems. So water, housing, obviously, and my own experience in that, building a few homes back in Tokerau, so just showing what it takes to do that. And what it takes is the relationships between agencies and iwi and agencies and hapu to make those things happen. Don't get too complicated, don't have ram too much bureaucracy in the middle, but just get the homes up and running. The cost of surviving as opposed to the cost of dying. Just good, healthy kai, which we can't afford. The connection between education and health. Those when our kids when our teeth are rotting, when the amount of fillings are just disabling our babies to think, learn, and come home and be well, and have a night where they can sleep without pain. Those are the health issues, and many like that. Yeah, it's horribly difficult for our families, and many of us that are working in the space to make Māori lives mighty.
E te tuakana, tēnā koe.
Tēnā koe, tēnā tātou.
Ka nui te mihi ki te Māngai Pāho me irirangi te motu. Thanks for joining us. We'll be back with more mata in March. Nohoro mai.
Ko te reo, te take.